Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Graff, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief at National Jeweler. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler's webinar series sponsored by RDI Diamonds. Today's session is hosted by our Senior Editor, Brecken Branstrator, and features Kate Peterson of Performance Concepts and Kathleen Cutler, CEO of Kathleen Cutler Strategy, talking about hosting events in this most unusual year. Before I turn it over to Brecken to get the webinar started, I just want to let all our attendees know that if they have a question, they can type it into the Zoom Q&A box. I'll be back on at the end of the discussion to share any questions you might have with Brecken, Kate, and Kathleen. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler website this coming Friday. Thank you. And now I'm going to hand it over to Brecken so we can get started with our questions today.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that introduction. I am so happy to be here today with these two experts now that we are well into November, which means consumers have long started their Christmas shopping and businesses their holiday marketing as well. But 2020 obviously has brought some challenges, to say the least, for all businesses and forced them to sort of rethink the ways that they are operating and reaching out to their clients and consumers. So we're here today to talk about the different kind of events that they can host, as well as how to handle them. But before we get started, I'd love to have our two guests give us a brief introduction about their time in the industry and what it is they do now. So I'm going to toss it over to them real quick. And Kate, if you'd like to get started and just give us a little bit of an intro.
Sure. I think I would be lying if I didn't say that most of you have probably heard my name from time to time because I've been around since I think Moby Dick was probably a minnow, but it literally a very long time. My company Performance Concepts has been around for about 20 years right now, working with retailers, manufacturers, designers all over the world, primarily in business building, client development, internal business development, and organizational design. We've seen a lot over the years. I started in the industry when I was literally 16, and I tell you what that means. That means that was back in the day when the Sears catalog was what was scaring us, not online sellers, okay? Now, in all seriousness, there's been a lot of changes in this industry, and this is just the next one in a sequence, and I'm happy to be here to talk about some of these things.
Thanks, Kate.
Excellent. And Kate, what a beautiful intro. I'm Kathleen Cutler. I'm a 10-year veteran in the industry and have worked behind the sales counter, have worked on the bench, and now I help jewelers and retailers navigate moving into the digital age. So moving direct to collector and what the reality is to translate what's worked really, really well, super old school clienteling into Zoom webinars and text message and all of these different things, but really still maintaining that really intimate connection. So that is what I do. I help students implement this through a program that I run called the High-End Jeweler Society.
Excellent.
So I wanted to start off by asking you both just to talk me through some of the concerns you've been hearing from clients in the trade about connecting with their customers this holiday season and the challenges that really remain in front of them.
Kathleen, go ahead. You
Sure.
start.
Yeah. So, I think the biggest thing is that there's so many unknowns. And I think that 2020 has given us if we look at it in one lens, the ability to have a renaissance in the industry. So the more we can recognize that though our clients might be at home, our best clients might be in their multi-million-dollar mansions this holiday season, that they're still craving what it is that we sell, which is connection, which is meaning. So I think the more that we can see things through the lens of, okay, what's happening? How can I adapt? And how can I, especially right now, before the holidays, pick up just a few skills that will allow me to continue this level of connection with my best clients to make the sales. And then in 2021, really start on some of the bigger projects that are maybe on your docket. So I think that's really what I'm hearing is people aren't sure how to pivot. And I think that the advice I have is figure out a few avenues. Your best clients are the ones you have to connect with those people who are most likely to buy from you this holiday season.
Absolutely. You used the word renaissance, and some years ago, there was a large study done by some trend-setting experts, some trend watchers that talked very specifically about a retail renaissance. And it was happening back then. And this was around, right after the end of the last crisis, the financial crisis around 2012, generally 2013. And we saw it then, and we saw people returning to wanting things that had meaning to them. And we're in a whole new retail renaissance right now, but it's on us to make those changes and to make the pivots in the way that we have to for our customers. The concerns that I'm hearing are several. The first really is, as you mentioned, the uncertainty. We're not sure what's going to happen, therefore, how can we prepare? The second big one, as crazy as this sounds, is that business has been so good for many, many jewelers for the last several months as people have stepped back into the market, that they have either forgotten that they need a contingency plan or simply haven't had time to put one together. And that's very nerve-wracking for a lot of them. They just haven't been able to put their hands on everything there is to do. And I think the third thing, and possibly the most important thing, is that they're dealing with a very, very cluttered marketing environment for people. You can't log on anywhere right now and not be inundated with ads, 50 ads for the last one item you looked for. So, it's very difficult to break through all of that without the right people doing the job for you and a massive budget in many cases if you don't have the right people doing the job. So, those are some concerns that people have. And I agree completely that it's one little thing at a time that can be done. And the idea of working with the clients you have rather than trying to turn the world upside down to find new ones is by far the best way to go about doing it.
Right. Great point. So to start by sort of taking a more broad look at things, when a business is trying to decide what it is they want to do for the holiday season, what should they be keeping in mind when they're coming up with their strategies for holiday events and the goal setting that they want to do for those as well?
So, go ahead.
No, I always have my advice is always kind of around one foundational piece, which is your best clients are the ones you have, and you need to know who they are. So whenever I'm working with a student or retailer or a designer, always telling them, make a quick list. We want I like to call them your extremely important collectors. Who are they? What is their contact information? And then do what I love to call the 5-minute dossier. Spend 5 minutes on each person, write down what they've bought in the past, any pieces that they might be interested in next, go on social if you have the access to them, go look at what they've been up to, and really begin from there. I think it's really easy to start planning these very elaborate events, but what I really want to encourage everyone watching this to do is actually work backwards. Who do you want to have at these events? What are your goals with the events? Are they to sell or to create connection that you're then having private appointments after? But I think that's really the very first thing that I always encourage anyone to do before they get too deep into the weeds of planning an event is figure out who you want to have come to your party.
Exactly. I think that's a really big thing. I think in terms of setting goals for retailers in particular, I'm going to look more toward the mechanics of all of it rather than the how you get there. Let's talk about where you have to get to. And I think the most important thing to realize is that people are spending money. In fact, they will probably spend more this year by and large than they have in the past. They're not going out to dinner. They're not traveling. That 25th anniversary gift that they missed all of a sudden becomes much, because it was supposed to be a trip to Paris, all of a sudden becomes much more significant now during the holiday season. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons to do that. So my first piece of advice is please, please, please don't set expectations below where you would have otherwise. Don't be foolish about this. You can't hit a target you can't see. And if you set your target too low, you'll get what you expect. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, and this is again, very mechanical, so I apologize. This isn't the fun stuff, but this is critically important. Holding people accountable for closing ratios. All right, we've talked about this in the past. It's been important as a performance metric in the past, but now it is even more critical. If you're going to have an event and instead of having 200 people show up in your door, where by the way, if you miss 20, you've only missed 10%, right? Now, if you're going to have a virtual event and you're only going to have 10 people because they're your best clients, you can't afford to miss 20%. You can't afford to miss 2 at that point. So holding people accountable for conversion rates, closing ratios is absolutely critical. I work with one particular client actually outside of the jewelry industry that was in a very peculiar situation. When they reopened their location, they, because of capacity restrictions, could only have half the number of customers and half the number of sales consultants working in that business, which meant that the job became to literally double the conversion rate. because if you don't want to lose money, you have to make the most of what you have, which goes right back to what Kathleen said about working with the customers you have. Your best customers are the ones you already own. They already love you. So, if you're working in that direction, what you're already doing is upping the ante on your closing ratios. You're going to be in much better shape than trying to throw out a wide net and hope you catch something.
Right. Interesting. So let's talk specifics. What ideas can you two give our attendees for these kinds of events that they can have for their business, and how to choose what might be right for them?
I love the idea of these little micro events.
Yeah.
Where a salesperson chooses, their five, and holding everybody accountable for this becomes important. All of my salespeople have to find their 5 best customers that they want to invite to this thing, or at least get 5 by the time they're done. And whether it's with a designer, whether it's with a specific manufacturer, whether it's with in-stock pieces and an expert on sapphires, or whatever it is, to have this little micro event where it's like one of the more successful in-person events is the gemstone roundtables. It's very similar to that, only it's done virtually. And if every client is worked in advance, and with virtual meetings, what they want, what they're looking for. You've encouraged them to go to their website, and maybe the vendor's website or the designer's website, make a wish list, so that whoever is leading this thing at that point is showing only what they've asked for. It's very contained and very, very tight. And if each salesperson does that, if each salesperson has 5, if you have 3 salespeople and they each have 5 customers, you can bet that the majority of those customers will buy. That's 15 sales. That'll typically be pretty significant sales at that point over a very short period of time. That can all happen in a day.
I love that. And I think, like, playing off that, what I love to teach is distinguishing between a one-to-many event, where you'll be having, as Kate said, like 5 different clients in with you, versus like what we're doing right now, right? This is a webinar, it's a one-to-many event. And then also knowing that one-on-one can be so powerful. So having, as Kate was just saying, having set aside some time where you're actually one-on-one connecting, where you've done the pre-work, you have that 5-minute dossier, you know what they might be looking for, you're connecting with them via email or text beforehand, and then potentially even pulling some offline elements in here. And this is where I get really excited if it's one-on-one or one-to-many. You can send champagne and have a champagne tasting in a one-to-many capacity. And that's where you can have, where we're in a webinar where there could be many people watching, you could have a group of your top 100 clients all together, sending out some hors d'oeuvres, champagne to them. You could hand deliver these things if you're local. You could, have a chef come on and, actually deliver pieces of food to everyone, kind of a takeout style. There's so many things that can, and then during dessert, for example, you could all get back on together on Zoom and talk about jewelry over dessert. There's so many fun things that when we actually get creative and start to think of how can Zoom or whatever virtual platform you choose be one element, but actually jewelry, when sold virtually, is still a tactile thing. So we're not selling software, we're truly selling a physical piece. So I think that if you're in the one-to-many, those are some ideas. And then when we're thinking about one-on-one, you could send a box on memo. I think that try it on, sending things on approval, especially when we're talking about your best clients, you can actually send some of the pieces that you might be interested in, throw in another piece that you think they would love, and then get on a video call like we're doing right now and tell them not to open the bag, right? Not to open the box until they're on this call with you. And then you're opening it up with them and you're really walking them through. And I've had some of my students be so successful with this approach because it's so fun, right? And I think that that's, as Kate said, we need to not set our expectations low for a financial element. We also need to not set our expectations low of how exciting this is for people. Some of my my clients, because I get to sit in the back end of their email and all of that, people were like, this is the thing I've been waiting for all day. I've been waiting to talk to you all day. This is like the highlight of my week. So I think we can't underestimate that as well.
I mean, how cool is it to send your best client shopping? Get on this website, get on that one. I've done a little research for you. I want you to pull style numbers, pull what you love. I will do my best to put everything together for you. That one-on-one is critical. To Kathleen's point about things like inviting a chef or, wine, a sommelier, whatever. What a wonderful way to involve other small businesses in the community that are struggling far worse than a lot of the jewelry stores. And that speaks volumes to the people in your community as well. As just a gesture of goodwill, as part of who you are, as part of the fabric of the community, to have a local restaurateur or to a server from a local restaurant show up at the door of 5 people with an hors d'oeuvre platter that, by the way, is unexpected. Because if it's unexpected, it's even better. And you should, do little things, the details are so critical here. If the 4 of us are on this webinar, or even if it's a one-on-one, and I know that my guy is showing up at 2:15, I'm going to say, hey, Kathleen, let's hold for just a second, because I have a feeling you're going to need to get the door. Exactly. It's like the idea that you put so much thought into it. And that's really what it comes down to, whether it's, I love the idea of the one-on-ones and the small groups, because you can demonstrate so clearly that you put so much thought and personal care into this. And that's what people are buying. They're not buying rocks and metal. They're buying personal care. They're buying the attention that you're putting into every last detail. If you're selling for gifts as opposed to self-purchases, the more you know about the person who's going to be wearing the gift, the more you can say, when I last saw her at, or something like that, because you're part of this community. This isn't just, running it out there and saying, well, we have jewelry to sell. It's not people wandering past that have no relationship with you. So the more you can build that connection, the better.
And I love the idea of bringing in all the outside, those local businesses that people aren't thinking about as well, because I feel like that also adds the sort of holiday spirit that people are looking for right now, to bring that in.
And you can take that budget. I know at this time of year, we're often doing, VIP events and champagne and hors d'oeuvres and all of that. So actually allocate that budget and start to go into your own community and see where you could send, there's so many things that you could send if your clients are more spread out. But the same, I have a client who's sending local bouquets to all of her extremely important collectors this time of year. And it's simply just these gestures that, bring you into the community. And I would even say, to Kate's point, if you don't have, if your clients are spread out and you don't have necessarily what they wore last time you saw them in person, potentially you've never met them in person, this is where the power of social media really comes in, and actually getting to know your extremely important collectors, friending them on Instagram, Facebook, and then actually connecting on that human level. So you can be in touch with them, even if it is virtually.
That makes such perfect sense. Oh, and by the way, if you're going to use things like, local restaurants or florists or champagne or things like that, you want to hit the real home run when they deliver that stuff. Have them deliver a gift card for your store, by the way. Along with the hors d'oeuvres, there's a gift card that they're not expecting. It doesn't have to be huge. It can be $50 for that extra gift that they might not have bought for their niece or daughter or whatever. There's just so many ways that you can go with this, that the more, in my opinion, the more unexpected, the more surprise and delight elements you add to this, the better.
So my follow-up to this, I'm just wondering, as you guys are saying this, should businesses be focusing on sort of one or the other and finding a way to do either a bigger event or these one-on-one, or does it make more sense for them to sort of try to find a way to combine both aspects?
Bigger events are going to be tricky for a lot of reasons. First of all, they're hard to manage for people who really haven't gotten their heads around doing things this way yet. That's the first part. And the second thing is it's difficult if you're in a store and you have a good number of salespeople working with you. I don't care. A good number could be 2 or 3. When you're running a big event, it's more difficult for them to be a part of it. It's more difficult for them to own a piece of it and make it go. At this point, unless somebody has a really grand plan that could work well, I think it's much harder to run bigger events than it is just the small groups, one-on-ones, things like that.
Yeah. And we don't want to forget about staff, of course, taking the staff into account. So how can our businesses utilize them most efficiently, both before and after they're holding these events? What should they be thinking about?
I think it really comes down to just clienteling, like old school human connection. So I think, to Kate's point, like having these smaller events, and I think that they can, I think you could have them up to 10 to 40. I think when we get into 200, 300, that's really where they get squirrely. But if you have some of these like larger type events that are the one to many, where you are bringing in, a designer or an expert, to kind of do this larger presentation, and then making sure that the call to action of that event, it's not a buying event. And I think that's what's really important to always think through. The larger events, even a room of 5 people, that's not necessarily where the buying will happen. The buying still happens, one-to-one. And it really is when you can, whoever's doing that event, be it 5 to 100 people, know that then the staff is going to be taking either their clients, if it's kind of that type of scenario where they already have specific clients that they've sent to this big, at the end of the day, I always like to think, what's sales versus marketing? And marketing is a megaphone. It's like lots of information, like what we're doing right now. But sales is the one-to-one, the intimate conversations that, used to happen over a bench or over a sales counter, and now are happening in this kind of like intimate environment. So I think having your sales staff reach out beforehand to connect with attendees at, either the small to larger events. And then most importantly, after, like figuring out after, like don't expect someone to enter their credit card information on your website after an event like this. It's really going to come down to, hey, it was amazing to see you. Great to connect with you. What pieces were you interested in? I thought the sapphire ring would be perfect for you because of this in the past, because you have those amazing sapphire earrings that you got last Christmas. Like, what are your thoughts? What's on your wish list? Like, I really think having that connection before and after the event is really where, to come back to Kate's point, that's where you see the closing rate really happen.
Absolutely agreed. I think the other thing with regard to staff that's absolutely critical is assume nothing. Okay. They don't assume that they know what they need to know. Don't assume that even if they are, 25 and were born with an iPhone in their hand, don't assume that they know how to do a lot of these things. They may know how to do a lot of different things, but make sure that they have the training that they need. Make sure they have the right equipment, make sure they have the right tools, and make sure they have the right training. What should it sound like when they make that call? It's not the same as being across the counter from somebody. What do they say so they don't sound pushy? And what do they say because they fear horribly sounding, obnoxious or whatever? Give them the words, give them the tools, and give them the training. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to get there. And most importantly, give them goals. Give them very specific goals for client engagement. Give them specific goals that you expect in terms of sales for the event and what you expect from them. And just be very clear about it. This is a measurable metric, and they need to understand that, we're not making excuses anymore for not achieving revenue goals because, well, we know people are spending money, and if you're not getting it, they're simply spending it somewhere else. So make sure that everybody has the right perspective and the right tools.
And we have, like, when I'm teaching this concept, we actually have like a 10-part series of how to lead someone through a virtual call, because as Kate said, there's a lot that happens naturally when we're in person that when we're virtual, we have to fill in the gaps. So we have to be very intentional of making sure we're moving from a conversation, because we do want to connect at the human level first, but that we're moving it into jewelry. And I think that we're really actively appreciating objections, selling on benefits, like all these very classic things that we just have to reorient. It's not that you're stepping in. You don't have to learn a whole new skill set when you move into the virtual space, but you do have to learn how to be in this new room and kind of some glitches that might come up and how much you have to control and move through. Otherwise, you're going to be on hour and 45-minute Zoom calls and everyone's going to be
getting nowhere.
With no sales happening. So, and you just learned all about their cats. So I think
a very interesting exercise, just a short and interesting exercise for any business owner. Try to teach someone on your staff how to describe to someone how a piece of jewelry feels. Kathleen said earlier that jewelry is very tactile. That's the one piece, that's the one sense that we really, well, other than smell, really. I mean, we can't, if someone is on the other side of a screen, they're not feeling that piece of jewelry. Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it smooth? Is it textured? Is it, how do you describe how something feels in your hand? It's amazing how many people don't even think about that until they don't do it. And then they don't understand why the customer is having a hard time visualizing.
And I think we can't underestimate like the sending of the pieces. Like if it is in your own system that you can do some pieces on Memo, whatever that looks like for you, where they can actually feel the pieces, because you've totally nailed it, Kate. It's like, how do we make up for the elements that we can't pretend that we aren't missing something when we're not
Right.
together. There's so many benefits to the virtual space. I get to be at home with my son every night and I'm not traveling. And, I think the same for those in the retail environment. They get this different kind of world, but you should also expect to staff and answer questions. And I think that can't be underestimated. I hear so many retailers who say, I'm going to open this e-commerce shop and then it'll be amazing. It's like a build it and they will come kind of scenario. But it's truly like you're opening up a new retail location and it has to be staffed accordingly. You have to have people there to answer questions. I was part of a brand and we had 5 physical locations and we antique and estate. So we sold online. And we had one person whose whole job was to go around to the different stores and take photos of things, take little videos of things, hold it up to her ears. We really need to make sure that when we're selling this way, we recognize that it is a job. It's not something that's an afterthought. That's actually where the sale will come from, because, as Kate has said, if you're not feeling the piece, you have to ask, they'll have more objections. They'll ask more questions about the pieces. So you have to be ready to answer those questions.
And just to be really clear here, for those of you, I know there's probably a bunch of you thinking this, so I'm just going to say it. But people buy things online all the time. That's not who we're talking about here. We're talking about your customers that would normally be in your store, across your counter, 4 deep at a holiday event, that you're not going to have the opportunity to do that with this year. Those are the customers we're concerned with. The ones who really buy things online all the time, you love those folks because they're going to call you or they're going to look at your website and they're going to say, I'll take 2 of those and 1 of those. That's great, but that's not where you're going to have the bulk of your success this season. This is about people who normally need that much more personal, much more in-person experience. And you have to find a way to provide it without being, 3 feet away from them or 18 inches away from them on the other side of the counter.
Right. And before we started the webinar, we were all 3 started talking about our experience with this technology and the lighting and equipment. So the whole process of getting your staff ready can also include that nitty gritty, right? Where it's like making sure they have all the right equipment to even get started with this kind of thing.
Kathleen, you're the expert on that one. Let's hear it, because I'm sitting here without a halo light, as most of you can tell.
I think it's really about figuring out where you're going to do this. Like when we start to think about having this be part, and I don't think this is going anywhere. This is not to say that things won't be back open, and I have no idea about those elements, but I don't think the ease of virtual connection is going away. So I think that you will have a whole host of people. Everyone has a different comfort level, obviously, but everyone will have a different comfort level as things open back up. So some of your most wealthy clients might be the people who feel most apprehensive about coming into, if your retail location is in a busy area. So I think the more we can set ourselves up that this is the new reality, that, no matter, I don't think in real life, IRL is going anywhere. Brecken and I last year were drinking cocktails on a rooftop. Like that is what we want to move towards. Right. However, this isn't going away. So the more you can dedicate a space in your retail studio, really dedicate a corner, as I have, that's quite clear of debris behind me. The more you can look at, having a dedicated camera where people can get on a video call, dedicated lighting. Lighting is such a big thing. One halo light, as Brecken was saying, can make such a big difference. And then the same when you're getting ready for these calls, having your pieces set aside, like really having the system that schedules people into these calls, sends them the reminder link, sends them, this is what you should expect. The more you can dial those things in, the more it feels just as if you're, in person. So really looking at that, the technological stack needed. And it can be as simple as an iPhone, right? Like it doesn't have to be much beyond an iPhone or a great desktop camera. But it's really about, I like to say, you kind of like take whatever you're going to use and start to look at your lighting, figure out where you can dedicate, where it's pretty quiet. There's, many lapel mics that you can use, like audio will be a big piece here. The more professional you can really be when you're on camera in this way. It's just the same as if you were showing up to your physical retail location. You want to show up, groomed, in good lighting. And the more parallels we can draw in the online space, like kind of beyond just the website, but it's simply just like opening your store every day, right? You turn on the light, you show up on camera, you're ready to go. So the more we can kind of have that same thing, even if your staff is working from home occasionally, working from a corner of the office, whatever that looks like, I really think looking at, some small investments you can make so everyone feels really confident online.
Absolutely. I'm going to pass along a suggestion I heard just the other day. I will take no credit for this if it's brilliant, and I will take no responsibility if it's a disaster. But anyway, no, seriously, I was talking with someone who really truly knows this stuff about video and photography, not necessarily what we're talking about in terms of a virtual call, but video and photography and things like that. And he recommended GoPro cameras.
Huh.
Simple GoPro cameras, because they're designed for that. They're designed to capture motion. They're designed to do, things. And once you know what you're doing with them, which is not all that complicated really, because they're plug and play and designed for people to just know how to use, you're getting a much higher quality video connection. So for whatever that's worth, I have every reason to believe that that's a pretty darn good idea just because of who gave it to me. But think about it. If you have somebody, many people have these already, including many staff members. If somebody's got one, give it a try. I mean, that's the other part of this is just test it out. I mean, we're at a point, this is not like, typically where we would have live events or things like that. You would try something, and if it didn't work, you spent a lot of money and got nowhere. These are easy things to do that oftentimes cost you nothing. To at least try, give it a shot. One other point on this one is in terms of what Kathleen said about it's not going away. You're absolutely right about that. No matter what happens, you could open to full staff and everything else, in a week and a half if you want to. But the fact of the matter is there's still going to be people who love shopping this way and who want to. I cannot tell you over the years how many times the excuse I heard for an event, particularly in holiday season, whether it was an estate event or a designer event or whatever, for an event flopping, the biggest excuse, anybody want to guess? The biggest excuse always is, well, my big spenders were out of town. That just went away, folks. There is no more excuse like that anymore, ever. Okay. Yeah. Because now we know how to deal with that. And if the worst that happens is your big spenders are, you're in Minneapolis and your big spenders are in Florida, well, guess what? They can come too.
Great point. We're finding ways to reach literally everybody now, right?
Exactly.
And I think the piece of like the easiest way to get started, and I think that I have a philosophy that if you like your first video you record, you've started way too late. And I think that it's really just getting comfortable doing these webinars, like Kate was saying at the very beginning, like she's done so many of these webinars, since March. And I think that this is where this one-to-many really comes into play. Once you get, a good bit of lighting in your studio and you figure out whatever camera you're going to use, a GoPro, your iPhone, whatever that is, start to do a weekly live event coming into the holidays where you just go live on Instagram or go live on Facebook and start to showcase a few ready to gift ideas or a few, sapphire pieces, a few hoop earrings that to be popular. And that's really a great place to get started with holding, as it were, a video event where it's not RSVP, it's not necessarily that intimate kind of event. But off of that, you can then say, hey, to your best clients, hey, I just recorded a video. I think you'd love it. Want to hop on a quick video chat and I can show you those pieces. I pulled actually a few aside for you as well. So I think it's really, how can we make sure that video and live events like this become part of our daily routines, our weekly routines, and really is the way we connect. And I think that, having spent 5 years in doing exclusively virtual business, about definitely traveling, I have, students that I work with that has been totally virtual. I have relationships that I have that are totally virtual. And I think there is like a big ability when you have that technological stack ready to go and it becomes part of your day to day, that your clients will feel the same way. They're like, oh, I really am getting to know Brecken. I'm really getting to know Kate. This feels so great to connect in this one-on-one way.
Yeah, I love that. So what are some of the challenges that people might not be thinking about that could arise with these virtual events, whether they are vendors and suppliers or designers, and how can they plan for them ahead of time?
I think right off the top, there are a few things that have come up already that are problematic. The first is obviously the tech issues. People, need to be prepared for tech issues. We have a real simple solution for that. Have somebody bring their kid. I mean, I jokingly say that, but I really do mean that. I mean, find somebody in your immediate environment has to have somebody who just lives in this world, whether it's through virtual school or whatever else. And whatever the solution is, make sure that you have tech support on hand. That's the first thing. The second thing that I think is really important is, and we're seeing this already, and we're seeing it all over, serious disruptions in supply and shipping. Okay. Yeah. Be prepared. Make sure you give yourself enough time, make sure you manage, and more importantly, make sure you manage expectations. And make sure that you're not taking any silly chances with regard to insurance or anything else. Make sure that you're completely covered. It's happening already, and it's going to continue to happen. And supply disruptions have become pretty significant all over the place. And I think, that's really probably the biggest thing is just that is the disruption in supply, and then the tech issues. The only other thing that comes to mind is be prepared to handle returns differently. Okay. When you would have, for example, a vendor trunk show in the store, and customers would show up and they would buy, and the vendor would be there with them directly. The vendor may have an agreement with you that says no returns because, your customer's picking the stuff out, so they don't have to worry about that. This is different. You make sure that you're dealing with people who are willing to be flexible with you, because you can have this great conversation via a virtual appointment with a designer piece, and the piece could arrive in the customer's hands and they could look at it and say, that is just not at all what I expected it to be. At which point you're behind the 8 ball. You either have to take it back or disappoint and probably lose a customer. So, best practice is just make all of your agreements in advance and be prepared that you're going to have to be flexible.
And I did just want to talk about in-person events for a quick second, and whether or not, you guys think people should be attempting those, presumably everything, as long as it's allowed wherever they are located, and, how they should do that and what they should keep in mind for those as well.
I really think the biggest thing is private appointments. I think the more things can be small, intimate, private, I really think that is going to feel the best for your clients. Buying jewelry is a very trust game. It's very based on relationship and trusting the person on the other end. We don't buy jewelry when we feel nervous or uncomfortable. So I think the more you can have, if you're doing a live event, for an in-person live event, I feel like we need to now qualify that. If you're doing something in person and it's an event, have it, over a 3-day period where you're meeting with people in small increments. You can open up after hours or before hours for people who don't want to have, a lot of different people around. So I really think that the more private, the more safe and secure you can make the experience. It's really, in a lot of my clients who've gone exclusively private appointment, they're not accepting any or very few walk-ins. They said they're actually considering never going back because it's
hearing that too.
You're hearing that as well, Kate. Yeah, because
absolutely.
It's so lovely. No one's interrupting. You're not having people who are just browsing, kind of ruining, not necessarily ruining, but interrupting an important sale. You know what someone's potentially looking at. You can set aside that time, that bandwidth. You can staff more accordingly. So I really think that, clients I've worked with who've gone private appointment are loving it. So I think that we can't discount that, either.
Agreed. And what's interesting is, here's what people have found, I think, pretty much across the board, is that the only thing they give up when they do that are the first 2 or 3, quote, just looking visits. Which means if you have a solid website, if you have everything, and when I say solid website, to me, that means a very well-equipped website, not necessarily e-commerce enabled, although that's important in many cases, but where they can actually see product and see what you have and see who you are. But more importantly, and this is where it gets a little dicier for some people, have an attendant on your website. At least this time of year. If you've never tried this before, try it now. Have an attendant on your website. Go to Zendesk or so. That's a recommendation I've heard from clients, but there are other services available so that one of your associates, the whole, during whatever time you put as your open hours, is right there, so that if I'm on that website, you can see me, and it's a, do you have any questions? Is there anything I can do for you? So what you're doing is you're creating that just looking experience virtually.
Mhm.
And then ultimately, if that customer wants to buy, it's done through an appointment. By the time they show up, they have a fixed time. You have all of the pieces that they want to see right there in front of them. They're there to close the sale and take the jewelry home. They're not there to look at everything in the store. Most of the stores I know that are doing things this way have very little of their inventory out. They may have 3 or 4 pieces in a showcase
Mhm.
just to make it look pretty. But the idea is, those just looking visits become virtual, and the part where they're really going to buy is when they come to the store. So it makes perfect sense. The concern with trying to plan a live event right now, this is right up there with all of the people that had to cancel weddings this year. Okay. My son got married this year, and their date was the end of September. They decided finally in June that they were going to go ahead and pull the plug, postponed have their little backyard ceremony, which, by the way, is much harder to produce than going to a venue where they take care of everything for you. But the point is that to try to plan something like that with so much uncertainty is nerve-wracking. It's
Right.
nerve-wracking for the customer. It's nerve-wracking for the retailer, for the staff. So that's my feedback on that, is just to think carefully about that. If you pull the plug and decide I'm not going to do it and I'm going to go this direction, and you can be open anyway, that's great. But if you plan for something even larger, even moderate scale and in person, and you can't, you've just hamstrung yourself for a revenue that you were counting on. So think about, what's more comfortable for you in terms of your planning and in terms of just keeping yourself, dialed in on what you need to do.
Yeah. Great points, ladies. Before we head over to the audience Q&A, are there any other last minute tips or takeaways or tricks you guys wanted to share with our audience for virtual events specifically, I guess, or anything along those lines?
I think my one piece of advice is get started before you're ready. I think it's really easy, and I think that this is the personality of the jeweler, to want everything to be really perfect and precise. And I think that it's really about trying it out. Even if your lighting's not perfect, even if your technology is not perfect, start going live and start a little weekly show where you're going live on Facebook or Instagram. Start inviting your best clients into these chats where you set aside a few pieces from them, send them some tea, or have the coffee delivered to them from their local coffee shop, and just start to do this, because I think it's really in the momentum of it. And I think that clients really love that too. They love to kind of be in a beta test. They love to kind of see this behind the
Good
scenes.
point.
So I think recognizing that it's very old school what we're teaching today. It's really about client connection and maintaining this beautiful, intimate relationship, even if it is virtual this holiday season. So I think there's no excuse. You can wait until everything is perfect, or you can pick up the video phone or pick up whatever it is you're going to use tomorrow and just simply get started.
I could not agree more. I think that's absolutely critical. I can't help but think of the movie All That Jazz with Bob Fosse. Practice, 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 and what you reward is better. Not perfect, better. We're so used to having everything so perfect, and reward people for just making progress. The thing that I think is most important to me is remain positive and confident. You've got to be positive and confident with this. Present the idea of a virtual event as an instead of. It's not something you're doing because you can't do something else. This is, I think, the most important thing. We are, as consumers, all of us, sick to death at this point in this year of hearing sentences that start with "I'm sorry," "no," or "unfortunately," because of. Okay. So don't do that. Don't tell people what you cannot do. Tell them what you can do from a very positive and very confident perspective. We are so excited to be able to do this, because these are things we could never do before. We could never show you this wide array of product before. We could never have this sort of intimate communication with a designer before, when there were so many people around us. This is really great. So, think hard and get everybody around you. Put that swear jar up on the counter. Only this time, swear is "I'm sorry, no, unfortunately, because." Okay. Get people to really think positively about everything you can do.
Right. Love that. Well, thank you both so much. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michelle and have her share some audience Q&A with us.
Okay. Thanks so much, Brecken, Kate, and Kathleen. That was an awesome discussion. We got so many compliments coming in from our listeners while you guys were live, and I'm excited to share the questions we have. And I also want to say a thanks again to our sponsor, RDI Diamonds. As a reminder at this point, you can still type questions into the Zoom Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. While we compile the Q&A, I just wanted to say a quick word about RDI Diamonds. RDI Diamonds, the selection you want, the quality you need. Thousands of diamonds? That's just the beginning. RDI offers a wide range of services and support to help you succeed, from flexible memo options, a partnership with De Beers Group Industry Services, to generous stock options and cost-efficient shipping. RDI's goal is to provide the highest quality of both care and diamonds to your store. Visit rdidiamonds.com today to learn more. And that website again is rdidiamonds.com. Now let's get started with our listener questions. The first one I want to start with, and I thought this was a pretty interesting one, and I think it's one a lot of retailers struggle with, is a listener wants to know, holding events is one thing, but how do you actually make people show up to them? And I guess this is, now we can say show up and or log on.
I love this question. I'm happy to put in my 2 cents first. I think it's important to know that a lot of people will watch a replay, and really don't get so hung up on finding the perfect time, the perfect date. It's simply about having an event at the time you can do it. Potentially some people will attend live, just as they are this webinar, and then knowing a lot of people will watch the recording. And that's really where having those one-to-one, right? Having an event, which is this one-to-many type of thing, and then knowing that the power and the sales will really happen in that one-to-one, where you can certainly find the right time to connect virtually. So I think the more we can, in our minds, and for this retailer and for a lot of the retailers, start to distinguish the difference between the two, that the one-to-many can be, a little bit more of this like larger presentation type of thing. And then really I'm finding that most of the business is being conducted in that one-to-one type of environment.
I would agree. Also, I think it's important to understand that people show up when they have a reason to show up, and the reason is theirs, not yours. So in other words, inviting your entire client base for a large event for whatever reason, and I happen to be one of those people who has no interest in whatever that particular event is about, I have no reason to show up. On the other hand, if you're segmenting your lists and you're making sure that when you invite people, you're inviting the right people for the right reasons, if they want to bring friends, that's great. But at the same time, narrowing your focus tends to enhance your opportunities for people to actually be there. They come if there's something of interest for them and if the timing is convenient. If it's not, they'll follow up and watch a replay, or, you follow up and offer to send them a recording or something like that so they can see what's going on. But make sure it's relevant. Not everything you have is relevant to everybody who buys from you. And that's a real common mistake that people make is to try to do that, to keep marketing events to the same people over and over and over and over again. The first time I get a notice of something that doesn't look like anything I'd be interested in, I write it off as, well, it was just a mistake. The second time, it's like, okay, so now I'm part of a list and they're not really paying attention to me and who I am and what I want. So it's important to just focus on which customers for which product or which ideas that you have.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great. Yeah, I was just going to say, it's the difference between like a group text, right, where you're like, no, it got sent to so many people, versus that personal invitation. So I think the more, and that goes back to Brecken's question about what should staff be doing. They should be personally inviting people before giving them what's in it for them. I think you'd love this because, your love of rubies. We're going to be highlighting some really amazing collections that haven't been seen before. And then what Kate's just said, after the event, you can send them the recording and say like, hey, I think if you tune in at minute 15, there's a piece I think you would love. And I'd love to hop on a call and share more with you. Like, it just needs to be hyper personalized versus this kind of like, as you were saying, Kate, like this kind of mass type of technique.
Thank you so much. I think those were all great points. So you Kathleen and Kate, you got into this a little bit earlier, but somebody here wants to know, when you have, the question is, do you discount your jewelry or add small gifts to it? And I'm going to assume they mean for these kind of like specialized events. And we talked about this a little bit. I love those suggestions you made about, having like a bottle of wine or a bottle of champagne show up at the door. So I'm going to guess the answer to this question would be, I don't know about the discounting, but the small gifts, yes? What do you think of the discounting?
I think in many cases, discounting can be more harmful than it can be helpful. Not always. I mean, it really depends on what your objective is. Are you moving out inventory that's been in the store for a while? Are you running a promotion that's price focused or things like that? But typically when it comes to an event, a small gift, it goes a lot further, I think, than a discount. And that small gift can be a gift card to the store, which in a sense is a discount, but not quite the same. If you give someone a $50 gift card, that's often enough to motivate a $500 purchase, but a 10% discount is not. Now that's a little weird, so think about it. But if you do the math, if you're, it's like the whole idea of whether you quote, dollars or percents to, when you're talking about discounts. A 10% discount means nothing, but if I'm going to give you $500 on a $5,000 item, $500 means a lot. You see, so the idea of a gift card is useful, or gifts from local merchants, gifts from other local businesses that you can make a part of your event virtually, just the same as you would in store. All of those things start to become pretty valuable in terms of making sure that you're touching people in a way that says we value you.
And I think the same, like when I teach this concept, I call it the vernissage style of doing business. And I work with a lot of designers, and this can be, the vernissage coming from the French term of varnishing an art collection and inviting a few people to come view it before the public gets to view it.
There you go.
So you can set aside a special pieces of your collection that are password protected, and only people who attend or RSVP to this event can shop things before they're released to the public. There could be a special pricing or special bundling, or you only get to look at pieces from the vault for 4 days after an event like this. There's a lot of ways to be really creative around how to do this. But again, it's what Kate, to come back to what Kate said at the beginning, we need to set our expectations. People won't just shop with us because there is a discount. I think we need to always make sure we're staying out of our clients' pocketbooks. They maybe, if we're around a lot of small business owners, maybe collectively people are experiencing a downturn, but we have to remember that there are a lot of people right now who aren't. So we don't need to discount. People don't necessarily expect discounting. I think in a more broad sense, when this becomes part of your strategy continuously, after this holiday season, partnering with a charity for some of these events can be beautiful, because then you donate a percentage of all proceeds from this event to that charity, and then you can tap into their clientele as well. So I think that there can be special pricing, there can be a donation, there can be a gift, as you were saying, Kate, but I think we need to be careful that that's not what people are expecting.
Exactly. In terms of, just real quickly, I know this is a little off topic, but to what Kathleen said about donations and charities, something I saw very recently that I thought was brilliant was an alternative to the percentage of proceeds. For every purchase, we will make a donation in your name.
Yeah, and I think that's. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Kate.
Anyway, no, that was just it makes people feel more attached, more engaged. And I hadn't seen that done before. I was, was an advocate of the percentage of proceeds kind of thing, but, pick a percentage and say, we'll make a donation of, X percent or X dollars in your name to one of these 3 charities you pick.
I think that's so interesting. It's such a good suggestion, Kathleen and Kate, because I think more and more, especially with younger shoppers, they want to know where these businesses stand and where kind of like, they want to know what your kind of, social responsibility, where you kind of stand on that, like where are you getting your stones, where are you getting your gold, and like what are you doing to kind of make the world a better place, with your business. And I think that all kind of ties in there. We have a couple questions that have come in here, and this is a 2-parter. One of our listeners said, hello, thank you, great information. How important is it for a retailer to have every inventory item included on their website? I think that's a really interesting question. And second part is this, what about having events for wholesalers to retailers?
Thoughts on all
Go
of
ahead.
it.
Yeah, go ahead, Kathleen.
I think that it will hold you back if you don't get started until every piece is on your website. I have a Victorian home, and I always like to equate websites to my Victorian home. If we just spent the next 50 years fixing it up, we would never enjoy or live in it, even one evening. So I think the more you can start to see your website as something that will always be evolving, you'll always feel as if you've outgrown it. You'll always see it as if it could be better. But if you were to see my Victorian home, you'd be like, wow, this is in such fantastic condition. But to me, it doesn't feel that way. So I think making sure that doesn't fall into the bucket of excuses where you're not going to get started doing a live video series, you're not going to get started inviting a few people to come to this intimate kind of fireside chat with you until every single piece is loaded, is a tricky thing to get into. Kate, do you have thoughts there?
I agree completely. I think there is tremendous value in a note at the bottom of a page that says other options available, call or email for details. Unless, of course, you have that website attendant who could very easily take care of that for you. Yeah. But no, I mean, there's value in that. It's like, again, Kathleen mentioned earlier the idea of just old school stuff. I know that there's got to be people out there as old as me who remember how cool it used to be able to go to the back and pull a small tray out of the safe that had those 2 or 3 items in it that weren't in the case. Because that made the customer feel like they were seeing something that wasn't available for everybody. So if you don't have everything on the website, use that back to that positive and confident thing again. That's not a negative, it's a positive. Other options available, call for details or email for details or whatever. I think that's a huge selling feature.
I have students who
don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
And the done. I have students who take pictures from their bench or from new pieces that are coming in and sell them to their extremely important collectors before they ever even hit the website. So I think that's something as well. Like we need to just actually work on connecting with our top people. What do they want? How can I make sure that I can show them pieces? I work with a lot of antique and estate. So it's like the people who are on those lists and in those extremely important collectors, they get the top picks before they're even on the website.
Exactly. First pick. With regard to wholesalers to retail events, I think it's a good idea. I think it's challenging and more challenging. Let's put it that way. Unless you can find the perfect time or the perfect storm moment for someone, they're going to be distracted. Generally, most retailers would agree with that. It's hard to find time to do something like that unless you just make an appointment. I think that it's the same concept, essentially back to that one-on-one. If I'm a wholesaler and I need to get stuff out there, I'm not doing trade shows. I can't get out on the road and just go door to door to retailers because that doesn't make practical sense right now. I should be doing the same thing. I should be making appointments one-on-one. What do you need? Give me, let's make 2 appointments. Today, you tell me what you need. 3 days from now, we'll have an appointment where I'll show you everything you asked for. I'll have weights. I'll send you the spec sheet ahead of time. So we're not discussing things that can be put on paper, and I'll show you what you want to see. We'll talk about terms and we'll make it all easy for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something to think about, but it's obviously a different kind of event structure than the way a retailer would be trying to woo a client. Right. I mean, it's a different relationship there, obviously. Really quickly, Kathleen, go ahead,
I was
please.
just going to say it's different, but the same. I think at the end of the day, it's just this old school, what's in it for them? Like, how can I give you a quick tour of the studio, show you some pieces that maybe you haven't seen yet, give you exclusive first glances at them. Like there's ways to, I love that Kate keeps saying, like, how can we use this as a benefit? How great is it to get on a quick virtual chat? No one has to travel. It's a half hour. You can do, all of your shopping with me. So I think that there's really a definite benefit to it as well.
I think it's about 2 to the hour here, so we're running out of time for questions. We're gonna have to wrap it up soon. But Brecken, I want to ask a question of you, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but is your ring light in a space where you could hold it up and show people, or is it kind of wired in there and you can't really pick it up?
Sure. I mean, it is a little bit. I had to admittedly not glue it, but like sticky tack it onto my desk because it was moving around. Apologize for the glare, but this is literally what it looks like. We bought it for $30 on Amazon. And I thought it was a little silly at first because I don't fancy myself a selfie taker and that kind of thing, but truly does make the difference, when I'm using it as a person who is relatively new to this. If I turn it off, for example, it's fine.
You look like me.
It's fine, but it does make all the difference. So I can't speak highly enough, and that's coming from me, to invest in something as small as that, I think. we've all
On
realized.
my list for today.
Yeah, I think it's a great purchase. And Brecken, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I just think it does make such a difference. I need one too, Kate, so don't feel bad. And I just want, it's also good to point out, Kathleen, Kate, you guys kind of made this point earlier, but this stuff isn't expensive. We're not saying to set up, you're not shooting a movie in your home. You don't have to turn your home into a movie studio. There's plenty of technology right now that's affordable and of small enough size that you can buy easily online, that you can just improve your look online. It's not that hard. I mean, you're right, Brecken, that light makes a tremendous difference, and I need to get one too. So thank you again so much. I really enjoyed this discussion. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. We actually have 2 episodes of My Next Question this week. So I will be back again on Thursday. That's this coming November 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Senior editor Ashley Davis will be hosting that episode. She'll be interviewing Cindy Krupp, the founder and president of Krupp Group, and Jen Lowitz, a founding partner of IHPR, about how to craft messages on controversial topics and navigate company communications in times of social crises, which we're certainly in the middle of right now. And you can read more about it on the National Jeweler website. And I've just dropped that link to the chat. You can go in there to sign up for any of our webinars. Thanks again to Brecken, Kathleen, and Kate for joining us today. And I hope everyone has a great week, and stay safe out there. Thank you.